Hello, everybody, and welcome to our South by Southwest EDU session, Building a Home Connection Lessons Learned. Thank you for watching and thank you for joining this session. This is a 25-minute conversation between three experts who have background in homeschool communication and connection. And I will introduce them shortly, but my name is Kelly Mendoza and I am Senior Director of Education Programs at Common Sense Education. I'll moderate the session today, and we have three fantastic panelists to talk about this topic with you. So before I introduce the panelists and we dive into the session, what this is really about is around family engagement and what we learned from the COVID pandemic over the past year. So when that COVID-19 pandemic shut down schools early last year, parents and caregivers' roles shifted overnight, requiring them to be co-teachers and to support children with distance learning. As we know, it was literally overnight. And so more than ever, families are needed to support with learning and probably will continue even with students going back to school with hybrid models and other forms of distance learning continuing. So this session is really about what we learned around what children and families need, what do students need, whether it's academics, social emotional learning, and mental health. And in this conversation, we'll discuss lessons learned about building that homeschool connection from the past year, especially during a time where parents and caregivers are the main link between schools and students. So that is our focus today. And I would like to introduce our panelists. We're starting with Tanya Kasaran, and I apologize if I mess that up, Tanya, but she's the founder of Fireworks Education, and each of these panelists will be sharing a little bit more about their backgrounds as well. We have Dr. Renee LaHoffman-Jackson from the FCPS, which is she's a coordinator of family and school partnerships at Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia. And we have Viviana Reveron, who's Director of Family and Community Engagement at Common Sense Media. So we're going to start, before we dive into the conversation, of each of the panelists just describing a little bit about their background and their work, and then I will share with them some questions and we'll talk about them. So we're going to start with Tanya, and we'd love to hear more about your background and your work around this topic.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this really important topic. I have been working with social emotional learning, developing curriculum, not only for Latin America, but globally as well. Teacher training in social emotional learning and leadership development. So that's a little bit of my background. Recently, I'm from Brazil, but recently moved to the US, and I have been working with Sesame Street in their project with refugees, but also in response to COVID-19.
Great, thank you, Tanya. We will move to Renee to hear a little bit more about her background.
Hello, I'm Renee LaHoffman-Jackson, and I am the coordinator of Family and School Partnerships in the Office of Professional Learning and Family Engagement in Fairfax County Public Schools. In my role in Fairfax County Public Schools, I support all of the family engagement initiatives and programs throughout the division. We are the 10th largest school division in the nation, so I support 198 schools and principals at the district level. I have a team of 230 people that support the work in Fairfax around how we effectively engage our families and our community. Prior to coming to FCPS, I've worked at National PTA around education initiatives on the national level, supporting school districts throughout the country. And I've also been an elementary school principal, high school assistant principal, and an elementary school teacher in grades 2, 3, 4, and 5. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Renee. Welcome. And we have Viviana.
Hello, my name is Viviana Reveron. I'm the Director of Family and Community Engagement at Common Sense. This is a newly created team, so we are really working right now on redefining how we approach families in the whole community. And before that, I've been at Common Sense for almost 5 years now. Most of that time, I was part of the Common Sense Latino team. So I was really creating content to engage and inform Latino families, particularly low-income Spanish-speaking Latino families, with technology and learning more about how they can really use media and technology to leveraging that for learning and just to make it like part of their lives in a positive way.
Great, thanks, Viviana. And so what I like about our panel is we have a lot of different perspectives and sort of different takes on this issue. So we're going to start with the first question, and this is around so many directions we could go with this question, but it's around what is the biggest challenge brought on by the COVID pandemic to schools in regards to engaging parents and caregivers. And so that's sort of, it could go many different directions. If you want to talk about several challenges, that's fine as well. But we're going to start with Renee.
So I would say in Fairfax, the largest or the biggest challenge that we faced was access. When we closed schools last March, hard to believe it's almost been a whole year, a lot of our families experienced lack of access. So either they were unable to access our learning management system or just access us digitally at all around internet service providers. One thing that we did do is provide Wi-Fi devices to families, as well as we partnered with communications companies to offer low internet service for our families.
So I would like to add something. I think beyond the digital divide, the connectivity, there is also like a knowledge gap there too. Like we know that some families not only didn't have internet at home, but also they didn't know how to use these tools. And that's something that we really try to address during the pandemic, is helping parents like, hey, if you don't know how to use Zoom, which a lot of schools are using, or Google Classroom, like we try to provide information so that they could also, once they had the connectivity, they could actually use the tools.
Thank you for that, Viviana. I have to agree. We experienced a lot of families with digital literacy gaps, and we had to create tools and workshops and learning for our families to build their capacity around supporting their child.
Yeah, in my experience, I would add the lack of clarity of parents' role. It was one of the challenges. From one day to another, they need to change everything, their house, how they deal with their kids and the school. And so for me, it's like, what's my role now, right? As a family to support my kids' learning. So for me, it was like another important challenge to make sure that parents were clear about their new role in this new model.
And with Tanya saying that, that sparked another thought. And many of our families felt isolated. So we needed to make sure that we truly had authentic partnerships and relationships. Those teachers that had those relationships already established, they excelled. They didn't skip a beat. But for those teachers and families that did not have that trusting relationship, they really struggled to create open space and authentic partnerships around learning to support the child.
Yeah, so what we heard is many challenges, as we know, whether it was access or knowledge, digital literacy knowledge to use the tools themselves, getting maybe training on that without, we had language and other kinds of cultural barriers. And then we had a confusion about roles and responsibilities. When now it may seem, thinking a year later, like, goodness, you know, it's kind of even, you see it on commercials, like making fun of everybody doing, you know, people working from home or students doing Zoom calls from home. There were a lot of challenges and continue to be. So I think I think next what I'd like to move to is the opportunities, and those opportunities maybe are related to the challenges you just discussed, or maybe there's other opportunities that you saw. So for the next question, I'd like to talk about opportunities. I mean, I think there's so many challenges that we've had in the past year, but could we reframe and think about, goodness, well, this is a wonderful time to, really increase our family engagement, and how can we do that? Or maybe other things that you've learned and experienced. So what are some, what do you think has been the biggest opportunities by the pandemic in regards to homeschool connection? And maybe it's something that, was done that what could be done better, or maybe it's something completely different. So I'm going to start with Tanya on that question.
So just building on Renee's comment, I think the biggest opportunity was the teachers in the school community to build relationships with the parents. I think a lot of them could quickly access that they don't have this relationship, right? So for me, it's a really huge opportunity to build this connection between schools and families, and also to discover their communities, right? So it will be wonderful if we have this connection already, but I think a lot of schools, teachers were discovering who are their communities, right? And find resources in their community, and also discover the diversity they could find in their community as well. So I think these two topics for me is big opportunities for schools and teachers in general to build relationships and to discover their communities. Sometimes it feels that's something that it should have been done before, but I think the pandemic just shows that some of the systems, some of schools, they haven't this.
So when I think about the opportunities that the pandemic has created, I think it was a time for us to be more innovative in how we interacted with families. And I think it also provided an opportunity for us as educators to be vulnerable, because we've always not really wanted our families to know exactly what was going on. But with all of us working from home, we all became vulnerable. So it was kind of like letting our families know, you're not in this alone. We are here and we're experiencing the same things that you are experiencing. I think that was a thing that was an opportunity for us.
Yeah, and I would say that from the parent perspective, I think a lot of them probably realize how important it is for them to advocate for their kids, because now it was really more important than ever, but probably they are realizing how different things could have been if they would have been a bit more involved with the schools. And we know, of course, that parents in many cases don't do that because either they really are struggling with other issues, with work and many things, or simply like culturally, in the cases of immigrant families, maybe they are not used to having to be so involved at school, or it's just like kind of even disrespectful in some cultures, maybe being so involved and asking too many questions to the teacher. So I think this was definitely a learning opportunity for parents as well.
If I could just add one more point, I think another opportunity was families, they were able to, because of the isolation that many of our families felt, we found that every time we offered some type of webinar or learning opportunity, we had many families tapping into that opportunity that we may not have had if a family had to come to us geographically to a location. But once we were up and running, all of our programming, our attendance really and truly increased because families really and truly had access and opportunity to join us for different learning opportunities.
I would add one point that I don't know if I will frame as an opportunity, but I feel that a lot of families start to appreciate more teachers, and that's something that I could see globally happening. So this thing is a really good side of the pandemic, especially the ability to appreciate teachers and their job.
Great. So, we heard of several opportunities, whether it's developing the relationships with teachers, better understanding the work that they're doing, discovering who the communities are that may have not been as involved, being more innovative in how you're reaching out to families, and perhaps reaching families physically that you wouldn't been able to physically, but with online family engagement options like Zoom meetings and so forth. Some of the themes that I was hearing. And I'm wondering if, to talk a little bit more about that specifically, in terms of specific examples. So in kind of going off of that theme, what are some new or innovative ways that you've seen schools communicating with and engaging with families during the pandemic, particularly when little to no face-to-face communication or engagement has been happening? And this isn't necessarily framing the technology as the hero, but more of like the methods of communicating with parents and engaging. And I would love to hear any specific examples that you have around that. So we're going to start with Viviana.
Yeah, so I do think that the main thing that happened is the acceleration of the technology as a mediator of the communication between the school and the families. I think it's been a long time already that this has been happening. But even if there is technology, that is very important. I think going back to what it's been said already, that it's all about relationships and building relationships. So I think teachers really did an even extra effort to reach parents where they are. And a specific example would be, I know that some teachers started using WhatsApp groups. That's like the app that most Latinx and Latino families use to communicate normally. So that there is no extra barrier there for them to be able to communicate. So that's something that they did, and in some cases also leveraging parent leaders. So also that, I think that's something else that probably I would hope that it would stay. It's also like that parent coordinator or that class parent really helping continue the communication with other parents.
One thing that we did in Fairfax, prior to the pandemic, we were using WhatsApp, and we continue to use WhatsApp. But we found, because in our school division, we have over 200 languages spoken, we began to provide an app called Talking Points. And what was so unique about Talking Points is a family could put the message to the teacher in their home language, and it would translate it back to those of us that are not bilingual into English. And we were able to communicate with families through this tool called Talking Points.
Yeah, I've heard of that app before. I actually took a look at it. So I guess I'm kind of want to go off on that tangent a little bit. It's just to understand better how schools are able to reach parents with where English is not their main language, if at all, and how you get this engagement with families that already have that extra barrier. So we had Talking Point, we had, using what they're already using, WhatsApp groups. Did you see, how do you support parents who, Viviana, you mentioned may not have normally played the role of being all that involved in their children's learning, and then you have the language barriers. Are there other examples that you saw happening, whether it's at the classroom level or higher than that, to engage these hard to reach students and families?
Yeah, another app that we've seen that is very useful is Google Translate. Actually, they have an app that allows also to translate voice, and this would be more for hopefully the next year. But you can even like speak in your language, and the app will translate it, and then the other person can hear it. So I know that many schools do the best they can to have translators available whenever there is a school event or whenever there is a parent-teacher conference. But I think when it's like more informal moments, I think this is a very good tool that could help.
I would add that WhatsApp is also a way so you can talk and you can record a message. Some of parents can, they cannot write, right? So sometimes they use their kids as the link between the school and the family, and also WhatsApp, they can record the message. And there is another challenge, right? Because if you don't understand the language, but there is another way to communicate with parents as well.
We created a lot of videos around a host of topics in Fairfax. And what we did is we had those videos translated into our 8 most used languages in Fairfax. And we created over 200 videos for families within a 2-week time frame before school opened, on everything from turning on your computer, how to access the Google Classroom. And another thing that we did is through those videos, we created live programming and video workshops that were broadcast on our local television station, because we found that if our families couldn't access the technology, many of them were able to do the same learning through our television channel. So that was another thing that we did. And we also have phone line responders where families can call their home language line, and they get support around whatever they need in their home language. So that was another thing that we provided to our families in Fairfax.
Excellent. I'm loving these examples, and wow, that's goodness, all the videos, and I had no idea about the phone line, but it seems these are great examples of, schools and districts going out of their way to provide whatever it is possible, or even the parents kind of going into their own using WhatsApp and these other tools. So we are almost out of time, but I have one last question, and this is more of like, it could just be one idea. It does not have to encompass all the possibilities, but what's one concrete suggestion or an idea or a tip that you would recommend to schools for meaningful parent and family engagement moving forward? Maybe it's something that you'd like to see more of over the next year, or something that came out of this great experiment that we've had in the last year. So we'll wrap up with just one concrete idea, and we'll start with Tanya.
So for me, it's ask families, ask questions, right? And checking with them and build this relationship. Find a way to communicate and use the thing that they are using, WhatsApp, phone, whatever works. Make sure that you are checking with them. Everyone is dealing and experiencing this time differently. So it's important to know your community, but also build a relationship.
I think my one thing is very similar to Tanya's. I would suggest for families to really and truly advocate for themselves. Don't wait for the school or the teacher to reach out to you. Perhaps you make that first point of contact, and so that the teacher knows your needs and the needs of your child, so you can do it together and let the teacher know that you're there to support and partner with them.
Yeah, and I would add, like, not forgetting the emotional part. This has been a very difficult time for everyone. So really starting with empathy and thinking that they are really struggling. Everyone is in a way or another. So yeah, start always there. So that will help you start thinking in their own shoes and how you can really reach them where they are, because that's what a lot of parents need.
Great. Thank you so much for those thoughts. So we had ask questions, make sure to ask questions, have families and advocate for themselves and get involved, and then do it from a place of empathy and putting ourselves in another's shoes as well. So I loved hearing these thoughts today on this very important topic that we'll continue to see change and morph in the next year. But I think what we learned over the last year, at least, is just a lot of things that aren't working well and what could possibly work better and what we could be doing in the future. So thank you so much to our panelists. And I want to invite you to take a look again at a little bit about their contact background. Thank you. So thank you again, Tanya. And I forgot an A on that slide, sorry. And Renee and Viviana. And here is their contact information if you want to get a hold of them or get more information. And thank you all for watching today. And we hope that you can take some of these strategies into your own work with parents, caregivers, and families.